Welcome to HBCU Her Voice, a place where we celebrate the powerful voices and stories of remarkable women from historically Black colleges and universities. I'm your host, Shanasia Washington, a proud HBCU graduate myself. I'm thrilled to bring you this platform dedicated to amplifying the voice of our community. We dive into inspiring stories of resilience, success, and the incredible impact these women are making in the world. From trailblazing entrepreneurs to innovative leaders, we bring you the stories that matter, showcasing how HBCU experiences shape paths and fuel passions. We'll explore challenges, victories, and wisdom. Whether you're an HBCU alum, a student, faculty member, supporter, or simply someone who believes in the power of diverse voices, we are so glad to have you. So listen up as we share insights, celebrate achievements, and uplift our community. Together, we can inspire the next generation of leaders and ensure our voices are heard loud and clear. A grand welcome to HBCU Her Voice. And just like that, I get to be back in one of my favorite places on earth. That's here at the HBCU Her Voice podcast. I'm your beautiful host, Shanasia Washington, streaming from the illustrious city of Houston, Texas. And just like no other, I have another amazing guest. I think she's going to be absolutely amazing. Y'all know I go and spy on my guests and see what they got going on. And I think this is going to be a really good one. So guess what? Just like no other, she comes to the stage. What does she do? She tells us her name, where she's streaming from, which HBCU she's repping. And I think she may have like a dual degree from one particular university, but I'm going to tell her story. And then she's going to jump right into that thing. Without any further waiting time, here's my very amazing guest for today.
Hi, my name is Dr. Keena Day. I am streaming from Denver, Colorado. I am an illustrious alumni of Tennessee State University. I have both a bachelor's as well as a master's in English from Tennessee State University. And I also got the opportunity to do some graduate study at Fisk University, which is down the street. So super excited to represent my HBCU and was able to share some of my story in the HBCU Experience series, if you've ever heard of that. But I am from Detroit, Michigan. I am a STEAM girl, which, really allowed me to have an opportunity to tap into both the arts and how technology works. And that has really dictated exactly what my journey was going to be. So I'm from Detroit, Michigan. That is a place where, Motown and, all of these ideas about singing and the arts was something that was instilled in me very young. My parents are both musicians. My uncle is a musician, and they used to do a lot of work around the city. So that was something that I just knew was going to be a part of my experience. And I started playing instruments and singing in the third grade. But most people don't know about Detroit is it is also a place where engineers and, people who are working in the big three take, center stage. And so many of us in my generation got the opportunity to study in a lot of different community organizations and things like that will help you understand exactly what it would be and what it would take to be an engineer. So starting in seventh grade, I began to do some work in aerospace engineering and got the opportunity to do flight time, got the opportunity to understand power plant engineering and different things like that, got to build different things, got to, ride in helicopters and understood how those worked, and also got to be mentored by the Tuskegee Airmen. So a lot of people just don't know, like Detroit has a really, really rich space for children to learn about STEM fields. And so that's what I thought I was going to be. I thought I was going to be an engineer. I thought I was going to be a musician on the side, like a lot of the engineers that I knew in my life. And so that's what I set out to do. So I went to Cass Technical High School in Detroit and got the opportunity to major in engineering as well as continue my musical studies. And so that took me all the way to Tennessee State University. And Tennessee State University allowed me to start to study as an engineer and to also perform as an engineer. So I was in the Aristocrat of bands and played the euphonium and got the opportunity to travel all over the country just performing for Tennessee State University for the years that I was there. I, from there, started to try to start this path forward towards engineering, but I could not pass physics. And I think that that is what started me on a journey of understanding exactly like how important quality education was, because, the lack of physics instruction that I got in high school really did impact my, trajectory of becoming an engineer. So I had to change. And at the same time of not being able to pass that, I became a teenage mom. I became a mother at the age of 19 and a wife at the age of 19. And so that kind of changed everything for me. And I had to regroup and figure out exactly what it was going to be. So from there, I decided that I was going to, one, major in English because I wanted to be a writer, but two, I was also going to use that Black excellence that I received from Tennessee State and study Black literature specifically. And so that was something that, really just made me who I was going to become at that time. So as I started to progress as an English major and decided that I was going to be in education, I student taught and thought I was going to be able to teach all these wonderful Black pieces of literature to students. And when I got into the classroom as a student teacher, I found out very quickly in 7th grade and 9th grade classes that many of my students couldn't comprehend the text that I wanted them to read. So I had to kind of take a step back from there and, think about like, well, I don't really know what to do if a student does not know how to read. I wasn't taught that in college. And so I decided at that time to wait to become a teacher. And I went straight into becoming a literacy specialist. And so Tennessee State University allowed me to study linguistics as well as literature. And so I received a master's specific to Black arts and linguistics. And so I have worked as a literacy specialist for the last 18 years. On top of that, I have become a writer. I have had the opportunity to share a lot of my experiences and a lot of my poetry in published text. I have 5 books that are published, and I will have 2 more published this fall, specific to Africana womanism. And I've done a lot of great work with Dr. Clenora Hudson Weems and have learned a lot from her and published in some of her texts. So that has also become a part of my story. So I live this dual life now where I work as an educational specialist, where I specifically work in literacy practices as well as building out intervention practices and different things like that in school districts. I am taken to different school districts to be able to change some of the things that they are doing that are inequitable for students, things that cause students to not progress, students who, have issues in terms of like dealing with the different types of systems that are put in place in schools, particularly white supremacist systems. And I work to dismantle those. So that has allowed me to be able to see so many schools across this country. I'm called in to be able to do a lot of that great work. And it's just something that, brings a lot of joy to me. And then in the dual space, I also am a writer. So that is something that, also brings me joy. And I use that writing to just talk about educational processes. I am a writer for Board Hawk here in Denver. And I've also had the opportunity to consult with different organizations, including Ed Curation, Google Education, and have had a lot of different interviews in that space, just talking about what we need to do for students to ensure that there's a space of equity. So from that, I've also gotten the opportunity to be a heavy advocate into the community. I sit on a lot of different boards that are specific in being able to progress Black women and what we are trying to do to, improve our communities around us. So I am a board member of the Colorado Black Women for Political Action. I am also a part of the NAACP, and I sit as the education chair. And I just do a lot of different work with nonprofits that are specific to education so that I can continue that work of building out equity spaces for students. So that is pretty much my life. That is what I do. One thing that I like to also share with people are 2 different things. I'm the mother of 2 Black male sons, one who is a graduate of Colorado State University. He is a architect now, and he works in healthcare advocacy. And then my youngest son, who is on the spectrum, is a musician and a senior at Denver School of the Arts. And so those 2 experiences of being a mother of Black men and being the, partner of a Black man, just being able to make sure that I'm being thoughtful of how I am setting them up for success and making sure that they are able to live the types of lives that they want to live and having access to the things that they want to, despite the fact that Black men have targets on their backs. That is something that's just very important to me. But as a mother of a child with ASD, I try to make sure that I work with other parents to understand what their rights are and to ensure that they're able to really give their students the best education possible. The last thing I'll share is that I am a stroke survivor. Even though I don't look very old, I did have a stroke at the age of 36 at work. And so that has just added additional layer of understanding for me and being able to make sure that I'm taking care of myself and pushing forward self-care, especially to the teams that I lead. So that's a little bit about me.
Dr. Keena, that's a lot about you. Let's start there. I always tell my guests, I tell them when I'm backstage and y'all on the screen, I have my own little hallelujah thing going back here. I'm cheering. I'm having, periods of just, this triumph I'm seeing in you. And I am truly inspired just meeting you within the first minutes here. What a resilient journey. First off, let me take in the culture, baby, because the culture in that background.
Yes.
That culture is popping. I'm here for it. Beautiful thing. I was checking out the background too. But so many itineraries for me in that initial segment.
Mm-hmm.
Part that really broke my heart when you said this is about when you entered that school and those 7th and 8th graders could not comprehend.
Yes.
My heart fell. Because I know that here, I'm in Houston and, I'm transparent. There's a lot of things going on in the school system that give me my son is 7, but we use a homeschool model with kind of a community aspect where he gets STEM and literacy at the library, that we have a system that we work through. It was so important for me. You touched on this Black man thing, that he didn't fall through the cracks with that. I wasn't having it, not on my watch. So I know that you were with literacy. I want to hear about some of these kind of nuances that still exist today in 2024. We still have to talk about it because there's still a need for Dr. Keena to stand up and show up. So there is a problem there. So tell us about some of those things that you're seeing in real time. You talked about some of those equitable practices. These are the things that people, especially parents out there, y'all hear me, should be listening for, especially if you're having a child that is matriculating in public schools and at a time now where literacy is becoming a foundational part of their life. So can you maybe speak to some of that, Dr. Keena?
Yes. Thank you so much for raising that. What I see in schools, and this has been throughout the reiterations of No Child Left Behind that progressed to, rising to the top in these different things that, we've seen in education. Literacy has lagged because of the same thing that happened to me as a teacher. If you're going into secondary spaces, or if you are teaching, say, math or science or social studies or something else other than literacy, then you probably have not really, as a teacher, received a lot of instruction on how students learn to read. So in the last about 8 years, since 2016, there has been a huge shift towards the science of reading. And you've seen more and more states that have actually started to force K-3, especially teachers, to have to take training in that. And we have yet to see the data of it, just simply because of the pandemic, causing different situations with it. But school districts have now, in the last 2 years, mandated that teachers have to take science of reading training. Principals have to take it. Special education teachers have to take it. So I'm very optimistic about what we'll see in that space. But that's what it is that teachers just do not necessarily graduate from college with the understanding of how students learn to read. And also, there are now alternative tracks. So it's not just people coming from college like I did and, majoring in education and becoming a teacher. These days, you have Teach for America and other places and other organizations that allow people who have majored in something else to come and become teachers. And that means that they don't even have the tools that I had as an education major, and they're having to learn while they're in the classroom. So we have teachers who, just have less of a toolbox of knowing what to do when students are below grade level, or, you know, how to even support with comprehension and like what strategies to be able to use. So that is something that I have to take care of in school districts here. Being able to make sure that we put intervention processes in place. A lot of people don't even understand how to, especially with older students, like actually intervene and support in that. We've also seen a lot of time being cut from the amount of opportunities students get to read. You know, the only way that you can get better at reading is to actually do it. And so students need the opportunity to read, but because, you know, a lot of students are not finding things that excite them, or, you know, that they're interested in, and we're asking them to read things about people who don't look like them or share their experiences, they're not into it, so they're not reading. Like, we have to combat all of those pieces. And Dr. Goldie Muhammad, who did Cultivating Genius and Unearthing Joy, talks a lot about the legacy of Black people and how important literacy was to us as people. Back when, you know, y'all know all these laws that were put in place, even in slavery times, to make sure that people didn't have the access to literacy as Black people. And the purpose of that is because when you become a literate person, your brain is just opened up to understanding exactly what's happening in the world around us. Well, the law was put in place to make us not be able to do that. And in her work, she talks a lot about literary societies that came in place in our communities to further the idea of literacy. We need to get back to that. We need our community organizations to really start to push this idea of book ideas and book clubs and opportunities for students to get the opportunity to look at, you know, people who share their same experiences and backgrounds. So the best way, and the thing that I tell parents all the time, is just making sure that your students are reading all the time, that you're working on vocabulary. That is the number one thing that's holding students back on the SAT and the ACT. We just need students to really engage in books and being able to navigate what those books are telling them about the world. And those are the big things there. The last thing that I would just mention to you about the homeschool space is that my own son, who I told you is on the spectrum, had a couple of situations where, you know, they didn't know what to do with him as a person on the spectrum. And so I had to homeschool my own son for multiple years. Now think about the parents who can't do that and don't have those opportunities. We have to work as a community to make sure that we're broadening the opportunities for parents to be able to tap into things like homeschool and additional resources to bring to the home.
Wow, that was such a great segment. The first thing I want to say about that is the fact that, you know, you have this, you know, I don't want to say unconventional, but like you talked about, you know, some of these teachers are coming in not from the education background and things of that nature. So number one, that's like antenna raising. The other part about it is the funding, and then also to the pressure and all these different cues. So all of that stuff cooking up is kind of like this recipe is, I tell parents, you better be leaning in. You better know what these pain points are, what these cues are, because she just talked about, Dr. Keena very beautifully laid out the law and land of that. And this is happening all over our country. And the second part about that homeschooling piece, let me just say this. In our community, we have to remove the taboo from behind that. All this craziness about, oh, the kid's not going to be social, or what the kid going to do about this and what the kid going to do about that. You should have some of those questions about the system that you're sending your kid into. If you can, you know, basically depict or take apart one particular way of education, you should have that same energy when it comes to questioning where your child is going. So in this day and time where I'm seeing that more people are open to the idea, if they have, you know, the time freedom or whatever it looks like to be able to do that for their children, that they're actually taking that. And for me, it's been a journey, Dr. Keena, that I can never repay. Like I can never get any. It's been so beautifully to understand my child on the level that he learns at. It's been so good to see him grow through his own kind of like personal freedom. He'll also to develop as a Black man in this country, you know, the manners and things that we're doing, and also to exposing him to different life experiences. So I want to also state that, and thank you for sharing that you homeschooled your son as well for a period of time. That really, really resonated with my soul. Now, I want to go here because in the application you said something, and girl, I said, "Ooh, I will not leave this interview unless I ask Dr. Keena this," because I asked Dr. Keena, I said, "Dr. Keena, what kind of pain do you have?" I said, "Where are your pain points?" And she said, oppression and bias
Mm-hmm.
against different Black leaders who refused to assimilate.
Mm-hmm.
That was the response. Heavy space. I
Yes.
have to have you talk about it and walk our audience through what you meant by that as a pain point.
Yes. So, as I shared, I'm from Detroit, Michigan. So, I had the opportunity to go to school where probably 90% of my teachers were Black. And, I've now traveled the country and realized, because Black people are not monolithic, that that's not everybody's experience. And, I've gotten the opportunity to really understand what that means. But when you're in an all Black society, such as myself, I was told you're going to a HBCU. Like, honey, you ain't got no choice. You're going to college, you're going to a HBCU, choose which one you're going to. Like, I was just raised to know that that's what I was going to do. That's what was said in my schools. We used to have College Bound and we would all just wear our HBCU shirts and stuff. They took us on HBCU tours. Like, I mean, that was what my experience was in Detroit. And, I went to an HBCU and just really understood a lot more about my culture, understood who I was, got to really dig into Black literature, and understand, like, even from the Harlem Renaissance, exactly like the true excellence that just lives in our people. In a lot of the Harlem Renaissance text, I don't know if people know this about the Harlem Renaissance, but the Harlem Renaissance was really like this social justice movement that was kind of orchestrated by Alain Locke as well as W.E.B. Du Bois at the time, to try to take hold of Black stories and say, let's get in front and start to tell our own stories. And that's kind of where the fictional pieces came from in that burgeoning that took place during the Harlem Renaissance. And so it was really orchestrated, y'all. It was not something that was just happenstance. Like, it was something that was specific to making sure we got our stories out, that people understood the Black experience in America, and not letting, what was happening, which was the birth of the nation at the time, tell the story of, Black men being predators and, just different things like that. And so that's where we get all of that lovely, beautiful literature from the Harlem Renaissance. But I say that to say that because I went to an HBCU, because I grew up in that space in Detroit, I was just not taught to be silent. I wasn't taught to, feel that I was beneath anyone, that I was lower than anyone, that I was probably the best in the room, and to believe that. And that was something that I always believed. But then when I moved out here to Colorado, which is like 10% Black in Denver and probably 4% in the state, I learned that even though people say, oh yeah, this is a progressive place, like, progression still has that space of racism in it. And liberalism still has spaces of racism in it. So what I've now come to learn is that a lot of Black leaders are put into these tokened types of positions where, an organization will want to say, oh, well, we have a Black person here on our staff, or we have a Black person who is the chief of this or the vice president of this, and I've sat in a vice president role in an organization before. But where there are places where I was silenced, where there are places where people will say, oh yeah, that sounds great, we want to move towards this, but then not really get rid of the barriers to making it happen because they wanted to keep their white supremacy in place in the structures of their organization. So that's why I went to go get a doctorate, because I really wanted to understand white supremacy in organizations and how oppression starts to just live within the systems and what it actually takes to dismantle. And so I say that to say that, we have a long way to go, especially in the educational space, of making sure that Black teachers are, heard, are visible, that we are able to, put in front of students like things about their culture. And what's happening in the South, we're banning books and we're silencing teachers. And, teachers are being threatened with being fired and things like that if they teach history. Like, that's where we are now. And it is just a function of oppression and being able to keep kids, ignorant to who we are as a people. And so that is just kind of pervasive within this country right now, especially with a lot of the laws that's coming out in Black spaces by white politicians at the state level. And it's also happening within our education systems where, we are not being thoughtful about what it means to be a Black child in a school and how we actually, give that child a quality education. And that's what I meant by that is my pain point. That is what I go to schools to do. That is what I feel is the purpose of my life. I believe literacy as well as education itself is a civil right, and that everybody has is supposed to have a through line to it. And we just do not make it happen because we just want people to assimilate to this white way of going to school and this white way of learning. And that's just not what's going to make and continue the legacy of Black, excellence in our schools. And so that's what I meant by that statement.
I love it. And that touch point of moving somewhere that's like so far away from like your rich Black culture, it it shakes you. I mean, I think even like, and I talk about this often on this podcast, even from just leaving an HBCU and then dropped in corporate America, it was like an out of body experience for me, Dr. Keena. I just kind of felt like, okay, where did my family go? Where did the community go?
Yes.
What is all this stuff? What is all these people telling me that I'm beneath them? What is all of this about? Because I felt like that was the part where I really started to kind of have to really grow up, understand where these feelings are coming from. And then further for me as becoming a mother made me understand how important that education is from the onset as they matriculate through whatever for elementary, middle, whatever. Like it's a constant thing. It's a constant thing for you to be able to speak that culture, teach that culture to them as they matriculate through this space. So thank you so much for sharing.
And can I make an additional comment to that now that you said that? I just want to also just mention too, is that I think that we need to be thinking about induction programs like that for people transitioning from HBCUs, one, and then also Black students who are graduating from PWIs. I think that there needs to be some type of community space that we start to develop where those students who are leaving from being college students, especially Black students, are now like being paired with mentors to talk about, so what is this going to look like for you in the professional space? Because I just really recently went through this with my oldest son, who I just told you is an architect. And so he's the only Black person in his firm. And, now he's got to figure out, what does this mean for me to continue to be who I am as a Black person and not assimilate and still navigate through without, faltering to white bias and, different things like that. And so I do think that there is a gap in our communities and being able to actually offer that to people who are progressing from college into professionalism.
Oh man, that is such a sweet spot. That is such a sweet pad. Like that definitely we as community people definitely need to be talking about, because that and then you're so young. I mean, you're still so young to the world. I mean, 21, 22, coming out, you're young to the world in general. So to have that community building to transition them into the corporate space or whatever it looks like is something that, you just kind of spark something for me. That's a needed space, really all across the country. I want to go here. I know that we're running kind of short on time. We should have had a part 2, Dr. Keena. I told you it's going to be good. I have to ask you this because you weaved in something that I didn't expect. When you talked about that aspect of stroke at 36, it really gave me chills. I think one, because my grandfather, he's older. I mean, he'll be 80 soon, but he just recently had a stroke. And I know the process we kind of went through for stroke for that and how life-changing it was for me. I just see the world differently now. Can you just talk to us about that period of 36 and stroke? I want to hear, because so many of us, especially as Black women, we have to hear these stories. We have to hear, did you know anything about this? Like, did this come unexpected? Were there cues or signs that you could have potentially had a stroke? Just talk us through that space quickly.
So I was at work and I love my job. You know what I mean? So to me, I didn't think it was a stressful space. You know what I mean? And so I love my job. You know what I mean? But I don't know if I was tracking the emotional toll that comes with the backgrounds of, teachers who feel defeated, or students who, you're not sure they're being served adequately, or the stories from their homes and the different things that they've experienced, that actually like subconsciously does weigh on you. And I don't think I track that. So I say that to say that I went to work. I was working with a Black teacher at the time. We had a great time kikiing and everything. I was coaching her, and she left. I started checking some emails, and then wow, it's like I got hit by lightning. And I was like, I thought it was maybe a headache or something. So, but then all of a sudden I couldn't see out of my right eye. And it was like, did my contact fall out? So I had to go to the restroom. My contact was still in my eye. So I'm just a little confused, because I'm just like, okay, so now I can't see. I got this really tremendous headache. What is going on? As a 36-year-old, I didn't know what the signs of a stroke was. Had no idea. Had never even thought about it. So I just hopped in the car, drove home with one eye, and I called, my ex-husband at the time and said, hey, can you pick the boys up from school? I just got this terrible headache and I can't see out my right eye. So I'm going to go home, take some ibuprofen and go to sleep. And I think for him, he was just kind of like, what you talking about? You can't see. What you mean? And so he looked it up. I didn't know he did any of that. I just went home, went to sleep. He came home with the boys, said, we gotta go. We gotta go. You gotta go to the hospital. We gotta go to the hospital. And I'm like, what you mean I gotta go to the hospital? He's like, no. And as I'm like asking him questions, I'm starting to lose like any real sentences that make sense. Like I'm losing coherence. I'm starting to say nonsense things. He took me to the hospital. I'm calling people. I am like not making sense. People are like, what is wrong with you? Soon as I got there, they took me to triage and was like, oh no, she got to go straight to MRI. So as soon as I got there, within an hour, we found out that I had an ICH stroke. That is when you have a artery in your brain, it just explodes. And so that's basically what happened to me. And I had a lot of blood on the brain. And it took 6 days for me to be in the hospital and to recover from that. And then it took 3 months for the bleeding to come off of my brain. I had to go to stroke therapy. I had to learn how to manage, that subconscious, stuff that comes down on us, all of the things that we as Black people put on our backs, especially as educated Black people, the talented 10th, that we just put a lot on us. And at the end of the day, it's subconscious and it wears down on us. And if we're not being thoughtful about ourselves, care and making sure we're taking care of ourselves mentally, emotionally, and we're talking to someone about the things that we see at work, it just compounds. It just compounds and it becomes a factor of stress. So it took me 10 months to be able to learn how to drive again, to be able to fly again. I can't even fly very long distances. I just went to London a couple months ago. I had to be cleared to fly 9 hours. Like it just completely changed everything about my life. I've had to get a new normal in terms of like how I'm writing to-do lists and just making sure that I'm keeping up with everything, because once you lose pieces of the brain, it's not all pieces are not regenerative. So I was not able to get all of that thinking power I had before back. So it just really impacted me in a way. And now I'm just really thoughtful about boundaries at work, making sure that I'm working until a healthy time. I'm spending time with the people that I love, that I go to therapy on a regular basis and talk about the things that I experience at work, and just making sure that I'm keeping myself in a healthy space so that I don't have another one. So it's something that I've learned happens to a lot more people in my age range than I've known before. I've known a lot of people now in their 30s, just going around telling my story, and more people will come and say, yeah, I had a stroke when I was 36, or I had a stroke when I was 39, and people having the same type of story. So we just need to educate our communities about, what it means to self-care, what it means to like really process, all of the things that come down on us from being Black in America. We just have to start being able to process how that is for us and really try to find a way to live a healthy lifestyle in spite.
Oh man, that is just so powerful when I tell you that. And definitely like you speaking in that, and you mentioned the talented 10 and W.P. Du Bois, like there were just so many like it's like stimulation for me, something that I think even personally that I have to do a better job of walking away from the situations and making sure I'm processing the days, especially when you get older and there's competing priorities and, the kids, the career, and all these different things. So that was definitely a true wake up call for me, especially being close to the experience of the show, even though someone was very older, but just being close to that and knowing all of the work it takes to come back. So you, Dr. Keena, you are like a poster child for, look, I don't look like what I've been through.
Right. Yeah.
No, you are. You
Well,
really.
I will say this: I got a 40 under 40 from Tennessee State. Just being able to talk about community stuff, and just making sure we're educating our communities. We went to our colleges to learn, and now we got to go forth to serve. So.
That is so amazing, and thank you so much. Now, we definitely cannot leave here, Dr. Keena, without you giving our audience, our viewers, where to connect with you if they want to know more about what you're working on. Just give us some general contact information, whatever you want to share here for the viewers.
Yes. One thing that I will just say is that, like I shared, I am a writer, and so I do work with people who are wanting to be inspired, be aspiring authors. So you can contact me at info@FromTheDockTowerPublishing.org if you're interested in that. Otherwise, on social media, I'm Keena in the City on everything. And so you can pretty much get me on TikTok and IG on everything with Keena in the City.
I absolutely love it. Now, Dr. Keena, I want to give you the opportunity to cue here for your final thoughts. And I always tell our guests, if someone just skims across this and they just see this one part, I want you to give us a good some words really to leave this space and really, really something that really embodies the essence of Dr. Keena Day.
That's a very heavy and deep question. But what I would just say is that, as people who went to HBCUs, knowing how important the pursuit of education was, especially in the face of very, very traumatic racism in this country, sexism for women, we always rise. And as a people, we always work to make sure that we rise in spite of all of these things. So just one thing that is centered to my life is remembering the excellence that, my ancestors and my family members and all of the history of our culture teaches us. We have a blueprint as to what we need to do to move forward. And I just really try to make sure I study and get into that so that I can keep that idea of Black excellence moving forward, because we're always, always going to deal with racism and oppressive practices in this country. But more and more of us who get educated and then turn around and do something for our communities can make a difference. And that is what I would say happened in my life, and what I would just always push forward for other Black people to do as well.
Dr. Keena, I've been in the background just cheering this whole episode. I love you. I absolutely love you. What a beautiful, beautiful episode. I just have to thank you for giving me some of your time and coming to share this beautiful information with all our listeners and viewers. It was such a needed episode, such really a fresh breath of air for me from having such a rough morning. You have really poured into my spirit. And I love you for that. I can't thank you enough. So to everyone who's out there, I want to thank you for tuning into another amazing episode of the HBCU Her Voice podcast. I tell you every time that I will never leave the space. I'll tell you that I love you, and to remember to let your voice shine, because transformative things happen when you do. I'll be back really in no time with another amazing woman, and we are out for today.
Thank you.